This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining us. 877-217-5757 is your number, and we're glad you're with us. This is a once-a-month adventure with our governor, and he's been doing this since April of last year. So it's been 19 months and 5 days since you became the governor of Louisiana, and you were indoctrinated by all kinds of natural disasters last year, and this week has provided the 1-year anniversary of the historic flooding. What's your take on where we are relative to what happened a year ago?
Well, it was a challenging year, the March and August floods in particular. But I will tell you that while I'm certainly not satisfied because there are many homeowners remain outside of their homes, or maybe they're in their homes, but the homes are not rebuilt. I know that we've been working extremely hard, and we had an opportunity this week to visit with HUD Secretary Dr. Carson. In fact, I spent part of 2 days with him, and I can tell you that we are ahead of any reconstruction reimbursement program that has ever been undertaken by a state following a disaster in terms of the timing. For example, the first checks went out to homeowners within 50 days of receiving the money back on April the 10th. And then by the anniversary date, over 500 awards had been made to homeowners exceeding $15 million. Again, that's the fastest that's ever happened. But we're not satisfied. We're going to do a lot more in the coming days. But I will tell you that the team is working extremely hard. I mean, it's been acknowledged by HUD, for example, that the way we handled the appropriations and the public register notices, getting our action plans together for all three appropriations, the grand total of time that we had those action plans in the state of Louisiana was 26 days. And HUD said that was historically fast. So we're working extremely hard and excited about the help we have been able to deliver. Mm-hmm. I've met with a number of homeowners, spent some time over the weekend with some of them as well, and this week. And I know it's making a really positive difference. And we now have enough information because of the surveys that are coming in that we're going to be recommending this week that the Restore Task Force actually expand the program so that we can deliver more assistance going forward. And so that'll take place on Friday of this week. And so we're excited about that as well.
That's the Restore Homeowner Assistance Program. And you believe that it's going to do the job?
Well, I do. And look, it's one of those programs that you implement and you have to take into consideration all of the federal hoops and hurdles that come with the bureaucracy and the regulation when you do that. But I know that it's making a tremendous difference for those who are benefiting. And by the way, I meant to do this a while ago. If homeowners out there were affected by the flood and they've not yet taken the survey, they are not in the queue. I mean, there is no assistance for those individuals. So I do want to encourage everyone out there who has not yet taken the survey for the Restore program to please go online to restore.la.gov, and do the survey, or go to the phone and call 866-735-2001. The survey takes 10 or 15 minutes, and it will put people in line to receive help if they are eligible. And it's critically important that we do that. We've got over 40,000 homeowners have taken the survey, mm-hmm. but there were more than 90,000 homes that had FEMA verified loss from the floods. And so we know that there are individuals out there who've not yet done it, and I'm encouraging them to do so.
So it's restorela.com and the
restore.la.gov.
Okay. I'm glad you corrected me. I've said that a few times and ought to have it committed to memory, but restore.la.gov, and the phone number is
866-735-2001.
866-735-2001, and restore.la.gov. And our number is 877-217-5757 for Governor John Bel Edwards. And let's start with Rosalind in New Orleans. Good afternoon, Rosalind. You're on Ask the Governor.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you so much for all that you've done for our state. You are a great representative, as is Mitch Landrieu for our city. I have a question, however, about infamous Louisiana and making the news this week, and that is David Duke, sir. How are you feeling about the response to what happened in Charlottesville and Louisiana's representative standing right there in the midst of it?
Well, obviously not our finest hour, but I don't believe in any way that David Duke represents our state, and I don't want our state to be colored by that. Now it's obvious. Everybody who knows much about him knows that he's from here, but that sort of hatred, bigotry, racism is not who we are as a state, and it is embarrassing. And I'll tell you, there really is no place for that, especially those individuals who put that hate and bigotry, racism front and center, and then claim somehow that it's patriotic. I mean, this whole idea that you can be patriotic and a Nazi at the same time. I mean, that it is the antithesis of patriotism. And just go back to what we did in the Second World War, and we called our soldiers and sailors and airmen the greatest generation of Americans because they defeated Adolf Hitler and the Nazi movement. And to think that in 2017 we're dealing with this again on the streets of the United States of America, I mean, it is truly repugnant and not our finest hour. And David Duke does not represent the great state of Louisiana.
Governor John Bel Edwards is in the House, and his number is 877-217-5757. Patrick in New Orleans. Patrick, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, Governor. Governor, this is actually the third time I've called in to ask you a question. So I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I'm actually employed at a restaurant that is smack dab in the middle of the French Quarter at one of the most iconic intersections in the city. And as you may or may not know, there's heavy construction going on at that intersection, as well as New Orleans in general. Now, you are also aware of flooding that happened earlier this month, in the month of August. We had a 3-hour deluge, and most of the city and mid-city was inundated by water, some of my friends included. I was wondering, as the governor, what is kind of your attack plan or your kind of protocol for dealing with floodwater in New Orleans and in the state in general, with climate change being something of concern? Anyways, that is my question, and go.
Well, Patrick, thank you very much for the call. And I am aware that there was flooding, I think twice over the last several weeks from two thunderstorms that dropped a fair amount of water. The second one, they believe, dropped up to 9.5 inches of rain in just a couple of 3 hours. And obviously, the principal responsible party for dealing with flooding in New Orleans is the Sewage and Water Board. I can tell you we were in constant contact through the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness with the New Orleans Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness throughout the most recent flooding. And as it turned out, and I'm quite certain that the mayor came out and said this, that not all of the pumps were functioning, and they weren't up at full capacity, despite the previous statements to the contrary. That's obviously a problem. I can tell you that I did declare a state emergency so that all state agencies have the most flexibility, most authority that I can give them to go to New Orleans and meet with their counterparts. And we've been doing that on a daily basis to make sure that we are working with New Orleans, especially for the remainder of this hurricane season, to mitigate against the risk of future flooding events until all of the turbines can come back online and all the pumps are at capacity. And we are doing that every day, not just GOSEP, but the National Guard, the state police. And in fact, I had a telephone conference earlier today with all of those stakeholders to include FEMA, the Region 6 administrator. So we are working that issue tirelessly. And of course, I'm one of those people that in addition to the work, I like to pray, and the patron saint of Louisiana is Our Lady of Prompt Succor, and I do that as well. But that doesn't keep us from doing the work necessary. With respect to flooding in Louisiana, one of the good news items coming out of the flooding last year is we do have a couple $100 million to spend around Louisiana in hazard mitigation grant program funding. And that is being done. We are allocating those dollars and making them available to local governments at a 25% non-federal match. And we are working very hard to manage floodplains. Rather than raising structures, we want to better deal with the water that we're going to get. And in fact, some of the things we're doing are quite novel. In Acadiana, for example, 8 parishes came together and we put their allocation in one pot, and they're going to work on one floodplain, the Vermilion River, because it's not enough just to get, for one parish to get the floodwaters out of that parish and into the next one. You have to have a comprehensive way of dealing with that, and we're spending an awful lot of time, effort, and energy to try to get that right, and we're going to continue to do that throughout the state with the dollars that I just mentioned.
It's James in Longview, Texas. James, good afternoon, and welcome back to Ask the Governor.
Well, good afternoon, Jim, and good afternoon, Governor Edwards.
Good afternoon, sir.
Anyhow, basically, I heard on the news, as did most people, about former Governor Edwin Edwards recently celebrating his 90th birthday. I congratulate him. I'm just wondering, since you and he are of the same political party, I was just wondering if you could briefly kind of just generally compare and contrast his style and or policies as governor with your own style and policies as governor.
Well, James, that's easy. All of the good attributes of Governor Edwards I share, and all the less than good ones I don't. No. Look, I want to take the opportunity again to wish him a happy birthday. 90 years. His longevity is obviously is remarkable, and as the only 4-term former governor of the state of Louisiana, it's especially noteworthy that he just celebrated his birthday. And as I travel the state of Louisiana, whether it was during the campaign or while I was in the legislature even, and certainly now as governor, I still meet people all over the state of Louisiana who believe that he personally helped them and their family at one time or another, or that his policies had a beneficial impact on them. And so there are a lot of people in Louisiana who revere him. So I think to that extent, I hope that the people of Louisiana similarly think that the policies that I'm pursuing, whether it's the criminal justice reform or the Medicaid expansion or restoring fiscal sanity and honesty to our budgeting process, trying to shore up our support for higher education, reduce the tuition increases that had seemed automatic for so many years, to really make opportunity available for more people to succeed, regardless of their race, regardless of their income or their zip code. I hope that people appreciate those things about what I'm doing as governor, as many people seem to have appreciated about Edwin Edwards.
877-217-5757 is your number. Speaking of the budget, there have been reports you have been talking with the House Speaker, Taylor Barra. The fiscal cliff is looming July 1st, so we're, 10 and a half months away. How's it looking right now?
Well, look, I did have an opportunity to meet with the Speaker this morning, and it was a good, frank exchange, and I detected a sincere willingness on his part, and I know that it's sincere on my part, to sit down over the coming months in good faith and try to work towards a compromise where we can solve this fiscal cliff. What happens on June 30th of next year is a number of things that were put in place on a temporary basis, principally the extra penny of sales tax, but also some reduced tax expenditures that actually sunset. The cumulative effect of those changes will mean about $1.1 billion of revenue will go away. And then if you look at the continuation budget requirements in terms of inflation, in terms of increasing the MFP and that sort of thing, it's a little higher than that. But the good news, Jim, is we're not talking about a net tax increase. We're talking about achieving a permanent structure with no reduction, so that we can move forward. And I think we have the opportunity to do that. And we've pursued a balanced approach all along. We're going to continue along those lines. We have pursued revenue, as I just mentioned, but we've also pursued cuts. Since I've been governor, more than $600 million in state general fund has been cut out of the budget. We have pursued savings. The Medicaid expansion alone is saving us $300 million this year. And so it's this balanced approach that we're going to continue. And when it comes to budgets, the one thing I'd like to point out, because I hear it said quite often that government has grown too much. The state general fund that was appropriated for the current fiscal year is $9.4 billion. 10 years ago, it was $10.4 billion.
You're talking about the state portion.
The state portion. So what we are responsible for here in the state, the burden that the state budget puts on Louisiana, $9.4 billion in the current year. It was $10.4 billion 10 years ago. So that's anything but growing the government at the expense of people in Louisiana. But I will tell you, it's a difficult situation. But I was very pleased with the meeting I had this morning. And I've also been pleased with the meetings I've had with a number of other legislators and business leaders, businessmen and women from all over the state of Louisiana who've come to offer their suggestions, their ideas about how we can move forward. And I genuinely sense that we are coming together and we're going to get this problem fixed. We have to. The consequences of not doing that are just too severe.
Craig in Baton Rouge. Craig, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Governor, for taking a call.
Thank you.
What I want to talk to about is bad contractors. During this last flood in August 2016, seemed like the scum came out of the woodwork and took advantage of the people. I did not see anything in the legislature, or I did not see anything from your office in a way of punishment for these people.
Craig, first of all, thank you very much for calling in, and I don't know whether you suffered personally as a result of this or just loved ones, neighbors, or you just know about the problem. Unfortunately, there are always less than scrupulous people who will prey upon victims of disaster. It has happened over and over since the beginning of disasters, and they especially prey upon the disabled and the elderly. And they will get as large a down payment as they can at an inflated price and perform very little, if any, of the work. Now, it isn't a function of whether we have laws on the books. The laws on the books are plenty in terms of the number, but also in the severity of the punishment. We just have to have people cooperating with law enforcement, either at the local level. And I do know that this is one of the things that Attorney General Jeff Landry has focused on as well. And so I would encourage you or anyone else who knows anything about this particular problem to call 1-800-351-4889, 1-800-351-4889, and report it to the Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division because Jeff Landry has been on this really since day one. Before the floodwaters ever receded, he was talking about this particular effort, and so I would just encourage people to use that resource.
Gaston in Baton Rouge.
Thank you very much, Governor.
All right. Thank you for calling. That was Craig. Gaston, we're going to slide you in. We have about a minute before our break, so please be brief. You're on with Governor Edwards. Hi, Gaston.
Well, Jim, thank you. Governor, I'm glad you took my call. Real quick, I noticed when they were trying to pass that 17 cents per gallon usage fee or gas tax, that the price of gas went from $2 to $2.17, approximately. And then as soon as they voted that bill down, it went back down to $2. I wanted to say real quick, besides get your comment on that, is if you build that bridge across the river, you're definitely going to get a second term, even if these people that don't want the taxes get it built.
Well, Gaston, thank you for the call. And look, we just have to do more when it comes to transportation infrastructure, both capacity and preservation. That is a capacity problem here in Baton Rouge. The traffic that gets hung up and stopped on I-10 east and westbound is interfering with the nation's flow of commerce and doing it in a way that delivers an awful lot of pain to the people who are living and working in and around Baton Rouge. We have to do better. I think the 17-cent thing, I think that was coincidence and was related to the market and particularly a fluctuation in the price of oil. But there are 26 states over the last 4 or 5 years who have increased their gas tax. Ours, only 3 or 4 states in the whole country have an older gas tax than ours. And Gasson and other folks out there, this is the one point I want to make on that today. If we don't do something soon, we won't have the non-federal match to draw down our federal gas tax dollars from the Transportation Trust Fund in Washington. That would.
This is Jim Inkster. You're listening to Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards. 877-217-5757 is your number for the 17th edition of this program. Lee and Harvey. Good afternoon, Lee. You're on the air with the governor.
Hi, Governor. I want to thank you for your leadership overseas for the past few months.
Thank you, sir.
And I wanted to ask you how you feel about automatic voter registration and mail-in ballots, because it seems that the states that have transitioned to those systems have higher turnout, and that seems like a good thing.
First of all, thank you very much for the call. I had an opportunity to visit with Governor Kate Brown of Oregon, and I believe Oregon has done both of those things, automatic registration, and they do vote by mail, and voter participation is up. And she was telling me that there are plenty of checks in place to prevent the fraudulent casting of votes, which I know is always a concern when there's a change in the manner in which individuals vote. And so I would certainly be willing to look at it. I think it's premature for me to endorse those changes here in Louisiana. But would certainly be willing to look at it, and would want to hear from Tom Shedler whether this is something that the National Association of Secretaries of State have undertaken in terms of studying or coming up with best practices. But I appreciate your question, and I will look into it.
AJ in Walker. Hi, AJ. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Afternoon, guys. Say, I've called before about the water access issue. In the past week and a half, we've had a tournament over there in Lake Charles. Basically, it's a split between Orange and Louisiana Waters. BASS has said that Louisiana Waters are off limits because of the water access issue in our state. Also, they also said that the Chapelai Basin will not have a tournament this year, and that's going to cost the state approximately $36 million. Also, in the past week and a half, Lake Catahoula is in a lawsuit with not allowing the public to use the lake. I know that we've had Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser on there, and we've sent him multiple emails, and we've gotten, I don't know if he's getting those emails, but somebody's sending them back. That's tourism dollars that is not getting into our pockets.
AJ, thank you very much for the call. And I've heard concerns not just from folks worried about tourism or the large fishing tournaments and the like, but just recreational fishermen and women who are no longer able to access the waters where they would like to fish. It is my understanding that this is a function of a state Supreme Court decision that adjudicated the issue of who owns and has the ability to restrict access to certain waters and water bottoms. And I know that this is a hot issue, and I can look further into it. I quite frankly don't know more than that at the moment, but it appears to me that without a different decision forthcoming from the Supreme Court or a change in law by the legislature, it's not something that can be handled. And for example, it's not something that I would be able to issue an executive order on or remedy it in that fashion. So I'm sorry I don't have more information for you on that. But AJ, if you will hold on, I'll get somebody to get your number and your contact information so that I can get back to you after I find out more about this particular situation.
The top story in The Advocate today is that the state's controversial plan to revamp its schools has won federal approval. You have been involved in this. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think getting approval for the ESSA plan, the Every Student Succeeds Act plan, was ever much in doubt, because ESSA, by its very nature, gave the state of Louisiana, well, gave every state, flexibility that we haven't had for a very long time, since long before the No Child Left Behind Act, to design their own accountability systems, for example, their own improvement in systems and programs The question is not whether they were going to approve the changes that we requested. The question is whether we submitted the right request. I guess my biggest concern is it doesn't appear to me that there was enough of a good faith effort to reach out to the 69 local superintendents and to the school boards, all of whom have good ideas about education in Louisiana, and take into consideration their concerns, their ideas, their suggestions, and then incorporate those where warranted into the plan. That really hasn't happened thus far. I don't think it's ever too late to do that, because these things can be amended and changes can happen. And I'm encouraging the folks at the Bessie level and Superintendent White to do a better job of that going forward.
877-217-5757. Thomas in Shreveport. Thomas, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Governor, good afternoon. This is your House here, and I just wanted to call and make a quick comment about the Multimodal Advisory Commission.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Yesterday. So this is Thomas Carmody.
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Bel, you know, I know that you got a lot on your plate as well as of us. Here's my question for you: is that it was pointed out during that commission meeting yesterday all the different links in the chain of commerce here in the state, and I know that everybody is concerned about the state of the infrastructure for our roads and bridges, but it's so much more involved than just that. Think about the ports, and thank you for being in Shreveport, Governor, for the Red River Port review. I mean, again, but here's my comment to you. Is I think that it does re-emphasize the fact that it's going to take more than just the state of Louisiana in trying to address the infrastructure needs, that it's going to be the individual parishes that are going to have to come forward together to try to address, along with the state, the deferred maintenance that we have all over Louisiana.
Well, Thomas, I don't agree with you. And by the way, so much of what we're doing in Louisiana affects the nation in terms of the movement of commerce, that we have to be able to rely upon them for a good partnership as well. As you know, the Red River right now is rated at 9 feet, which it's the only ports along the Red River that are serviced south of Cairo, Illinois, have that restriction, and so those barges cannot be loaded the way they're loaded going elsewhere, and that causes businesses located along the Red River to have to pay more for what they are getting in and out by barge, and that's a competitive disadvantage they don't need. Getting it to 12 feet would alleviate that. All 5 locks are rated at 12 feet, 90% of the river itself. So with a little bit of help, and we're doing a feasibility study now, we can make that happen, and the return on investment will be huge. We've got to get to 50 feet on the Mississippi River south of Baton Rouge so we can get the largest Panamex vessels in. But you're right. We doubled the investment in our Port Priority Program. We've maintained that investment this year. That's an additional $40 million to our ports. There is not a better return on investment anywhere in Louisiana than that. But partnering with parishes, with the federal government, so that we can all bring our resources to bear will be critically important. Thank you for the call, Thomas.
Kate in New Orleans. Hello, Kate. You're on Ask the Governor with Governor John Bel Edwards.
Well, hello. Thank you. Governor, I truly appreciate the fact that you take the time and effort to do this show. I am a transplant here from Michigan, and I have many questions, but I'll keep it brief today. I recently attended the orientation for my son's public school kindergarten, and I was very surprised to learn that the lottery money is no longer flowing to the public schools the way that it should. Where is that lottery money going, and how are the public schools being funded?
Okay, Kate, thank you for the call, and we're glad to have you in Louisiana and in New Orleans from Michigan. The lottery money does go where it's supposed to go by law, and it does go to K through 12 education. There is nothing about the lottery proceeds being rerouted or diverted that is an issue. I think part of the issue is everyone believed that the effort to maintain the base support at K through 12 education would result in that money staying and the lottery proceeds being added on top of that. But the fact of the matter is, we haven't done as good a job as we should, especially over the last 8 or 10 years, in meeting the requirements of K through 12 education, even according to our own plan, which is to fund them each year through the minimum foundation program with an inflation factor of 2.75%. I think that's only been done twice in the last 9 years or so, and so the state funding component for K through 12 education is not as robust as we would like it to be. That has a lot to do with the budget constraints and the limited amount of revenue that we actually have. But I am confident, and I will look into it just to be sure that I'm not wrong. I'm confident that all of the lottery proceeds are going where they're supposed to go by law, as was presented before the lottery was ever implemented in Louisiana.
This is Jim Inkster. Thank you for joining us for Ask the Governor. And if you'd like to pose a question, there's still time to ask one to Governor John Bel Edwards, 877-217-5757. We go to Drew in River Ridge. Good afternoon, Drew. You're on Ask the Governor.
Thank you. Governor, recently you sent a letter to President Trump asking him to fast-track certain coastal restoration projects, given the fact that we lose an area the size of a football field every 100 minutes or so. And in connection with one of those projects is the Mid-Barataria diversion, which is a sediment diversion project. The Wildlife and Fisheries is presently in a position now where they're about to lift the moratorium on new oyster leasing and is about to issue what is estimated to be almost 1 million new acres of state water bottoms that have been set aside because of the moratorium that had been in place in 2002. Is it the state's plan to go ahead and issue those oyster leases directly in the path of this sediment diversion project? Because the last time they did that, that led to 13 years of litigation and stopped the coastal restoration project.
Well, Drew, thank you for the call, and I would have to get with Secretary Jack Montesay to find out exactly where those acres are that they intend to make sure that the oyster leases go forward. I can tell you we are intending to move forward with the diversion projects. I think they're critically important long-term to our restoration and protection efforts. And obviously it's a huge part of our coastal restoration master plan, where over 50 years we intend to invest a minimum of $50 billion and get the most bang for the buck. We're allowing science to drive that plan, and diversions where we get sediment. So we're not talking about freshwater diversions, we're talking about sediment diversions, because as you know, before the river was levied, it would naturally deposit sediment when the river overflowed its banks. When it was constricted with the levees, that no longer happens. So that's the concept there. As to where those oyster leases are going to be, I cannot answer that question right now, Drew, but I'm going to ask you to hold on and give your information to the folks who will take it from you, and then we will get right back with you, either someone from my office or from Wildlife and Fisheries.
William in Opelousas. Hello, William. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hello, how you doing, Governor?
I'm doing fine, William. Thank you.
Okay, well, I appreciate you taking my call. My question, state employees such as corrections, I was wondering what the status was on the merit increases coming back.
I'm sorry, William, could you repeat your question?
What are the status of employees such as corrections officers getting merit increases back? They haven't had any raises in several years, like 8 years or more.
William, thank you for your call. The answer that I'm going to give you applies to state employees generally, not just to corrections officers. But one of the things that we were fighting, particularly within the Department of Corrections, was a high turnover rate because of the low pay and because of the working conditions and the danger involved in being a corrections officer. We had a huge amount of turnover. Turnover statewide last year cost the state of Louisiana $114 million. And that's one of the reasons is because we have not been giving those annual pay increases. And in fact, I think it's been 9 or 10 years since that actually happened. what we were able to do working with the legislature this year is we did a 2% adjustment across the board to state employees' pay. And then we also are moving to a new civil service pay plan that will go forward so that the lowest quartile of state employees would be eligible for up to 4% raise each year. The second quartile could get 3%, the third quartile 2%, and the highest quartile will be limited to 1%. And so we think it's a cheaper plan overall for the state, but we also think it's more responsive to the particular needs that we have. And I was very happy that the legislature supported our efforts in that regard, because it's an investment we had to make to start reducing that high turnover cost in terms of recruiting, retraining, and also having to pay overtime. You don't have the option of not guarding inmates, and if you don't have enough employees, you've got to pay a lot of overtime. So this is a step in that direction, and I think it's one that was overdue.
Tommy in Baton Rouge. Tommy, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Yes, sir. My name's Tommy Strait. I'm working with a group called the Capital Area Veterans Association. We are trying to put on a Veterans Day parade in Baton Rouge this year. We had somebody go by the governor's office and drop off a couple T-shirts and a sponsor request. The governor, being a veteran, is going to be able to help us out this year.
Okay, Tommy, you faded out on us there, and before it got to a question, and I don't know whether you were referring to the Veterans Day Parade in 2016 last fall, or the one coming up later this year, but it sounded like you wanted my participation and support for the parade. And as you, I think, alluded to, I am in fact a veteran, and I try to make Veterans Day events and Memorial Day events every year. And so certainly that's something I'll give some thought and consideration to. I would just ask you to call my office, and you can speak to Katie. That's 225-342-7015, 342-7015, and we will get right back with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Jim in Baton Rouge. Hello, Jim. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hi, Governor and Mr. Inkster. Thank you very much for having me on. And, Governor, thank you very much for doing this show.
Thank you.
I have a question concerning net metering. We had been number one. The state had been number one at something that was not our usual number one at being last. We had the best incentives and laws for the adoption of solar power in the country. And we now are back to our traditional, being number one at being last. When will we be revisiting net metering? I get that the utilities would like something that was more equitable for them, and I have no issue with that. But currently, the only solution is that if we put up solar, we just give them free power.
Jim, thank you very much for the call. As for net metering itself, I believe that is exclusively within the jurisdiction of the Public Service Commission as to whether, and I'm not sure whether they have made any changes to the law with respect to net metering. As it relates to the incentives, state incentives for solar power, I can tell you that the cost to the state of Louisiana far exceeded the initial estimate on the state solar tax credits. Just wasn't even close. And we actually had many providers of solar panels who worked with the legislature in order to rein in those incentives. And at this point, they have all gone away. You still have the federal incentives out there around solar power. And there remains an industry in Louisiana. Now, I will concede to you it's not as robust as it was, but neither is the cost of that program as high as it was either. And maybe there's a better balance to strike But as far as net metering goes, I think that's a Public Service Commission issue, and I'm not prepared to talk about that. But we had to reduce our tax expenditures because they were absolutely cleaning our lunch, and the solar tax credit was one of those. And if you want to pursue a different balance, perhaps with a lesser credit that will cost the state less money, then that's something that we could potentially consider down the road.
Lee in Prairieville. We're short on time. Lee, please be brief. You're on with the governor.
Is this Ray instead of Lee?
Okay, Ray.
Jim, thanks for taking my call. Brief question. Does the DOT have any plans to improve drainage across I-12 so we don't have the repeat of the flooding in Walker, Livingston, Denham that we had a year ago? Yeah. I'll take my answer off.
Ray, thank you very much for the call, and that is a consideration. It's something that DOTD is considering, both as it relates to the additional construction that is going along on I-12, and whether a different design should be used for the barrier that is there to prevent east and westbound traffic from crossing over and having that head-on collision. And so I know that they are looking at that. I don't have a final answer for you there. With respect to the barrier that is already in place and that is the subject of litigation, I can tell you that DOTD is looking at that as well, but because it's under litigation, I don't expect that there's going to be an announcement coming very soon. And I can tell you studies continue to be done as to what role the barrier played and whether it was a lack of subsurface drainage or whether subsurface drainage was clogged up or what all played into to that flood. And that work continues, but I am working with Secretary Sean Wilson at DOTD to get these answers and to move forward as quickly as possible with changes if they are warranted.
Thank you for listening to Ask the Governor, and Governor John Bel Edwards will return on September 20th for show number 18. Until then, for the Governor, I'm Jim Inkster. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned.